Our ambition with the Surfrider podcast, I think, is a couple things. One, we live in an age of like sound bites, memes, and Instagram posts. And the issues that we're working on are, Surfrider as an organization is complex, and the issues we're working on are complex. So there's a deeper, richer story behind saving trussels or, addressing climate change on our coast that's going to swamp our surf spots or the plague of plastic pollution. So part of it is I want to tell a deeper, richer story about the work. And then the other thing about it is there's one of the things that has kept me at Surfrider for 26 years is the people involved in this organization are incredible. Mm-hmm. And that's the guy who got up Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and went down to the beach in Huntington. It was like 45 degrees and set up a tent as a volunteer to clean trash off the beach while all of us were sipping coffee and doom scrolling, to famous musicians and celebrities who lend their time and energy to the cause, and sort of everyone in between. So I think there's sort of an unlimited number of interesting human interest stories about people making a difference.
Welcome to the Surfrider podcast presented by the Surfrider Foundation. That was the voice of Surfrider CEO Chad Nelson. My name is David Scales, and we're going to hear a lot more from Chad in the upcoming episodes. But for this, the first episode, we thought it would be appropriate if we brought you to the dirtiest beach in America.
All I know is that this is a public health ticking time bomb, that we're going to look back in 10 years and see that this was a situation way worse than Flint, Michigan.
That was Mayor Paloma Aguirre of Imperial Beach, located in San Diego's South Bay on the border of Mexico in California. The ticking time bomb that she is referring to is the dynamic problem of the Tijuana River. It's a courier of pollutants that come into the U.S. from Mexico without any treatment. These pollutants are then deposited into the Pacific in Imperial Beach, but all along the path of the river, they are poisoning San Diego residents. Paloma Aguirre is not only the mayor, but she's also a former competitive bodyboarder with an immense love for the ocean.
We have, don't tell anybody, the best waves in the entire county. They're pretty epic, barely peaky type of surf. And we're just a really tight-knit community that looks out for each other. It's pretty cool.
Despite having access to great surf, Mayor Paloma Aguirre hasn't been in the ocean at her home spot since September 21st, 2021. And that is, of course, due to pollution that has forced the beach closures for nearly 4 years.
I serve on the Coastal Commission, and there's no other beach that's been closed this many consecutive days. I don't think in the entire state, if not the nation. We had maybe 2-3 days that a stretch of our beach was open, and then there was one day where half a day most of the beach was open, and then the test came back. We have some of the best testing in the nation. It's because of our advocacy work, and actually Surfrider was part of this. We advocated for faster DNA-based testing, which produces results in 4 to 6 hours rather than the traditional culture-based testing, which takes 24 to 48. But this type of testing picks up a lot more pollutants that we didn't know were present in the water. So it's stronger, and now we know that we've been polluted in really polluted water.
Among those pollutants are things that you might expect from untreated sewage. E. coli, fecal coliform, but those samples are also testing positive for uranium, arsenic, lead, and dozens of other incredibly dangerous industrial chemicals. So this transboundary pollution has been a known problem for over 100 years, but it's gotten drastically worse in recent years. Originally, it was mostly untreated residential sewage that would cross the border and pour into the Pacific Ocean in San Diego. But U.S. businesses have relocated to Mexico, and they're now manufacturing in Tijuana. So it's not just untreated sewage that's making its way into Imperial Beach, it is also industrial waste. And the 2 sewer treatment plants are insufficient to service the rapid urbanization and industrial development.
There's a role that then NAFTA, now the USMCA, has played in free trade between Canada, US, and Mexico. I think the fact that Mexico has less expensive labor, less enforcement of their regulations. They do have a lot of environmental regulations. They just don't have the resources to enforce them. A lot of the assembly plants get away with dumping chemical and heavy metal waste into the river. So all of that is carried by the river. So the river is not just contaminated with wastewater, residential wastewater. It's carrying industrial waste as well, which can be extremely, extremely harmful to not just the ecosystems at the coast, but also to public health. That's why we have declared it a state of emergency, and the county as well. Our governor has yet to declare a state of emergency related to this crisis, and therefore the president hasn't either. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, things started to really worsen because the flow in the river started to increase. We're seeing astronomically high levels of flow in the river. There were a few weeks during the summer months that the odors got really intense to the point where none of us could open our windows. And it was awful because it was hot, and none of us mostly have AC. We never needed that. Imperial Beach has a median annual temperature of 72. So it got really bad. There was a number of universities doing sampling and studying the area. We had 4 different universities actually, and they were measuring not just hydrogen sulfide, but a number of different chemicals, metals, other pollutants. And they started to see these increased levels of hydrogen sulfide, which we were already experiencing and feeling. So lots of gastrointestinal illnesses at the local health clinic were being reported. We even had a boil water advisory for the first time because one of our drinking waters samples were tested positive for E. coli. There were reports on the main stretch of our coastal street that there was an outbreak of Shigella. It's been really, really bad. And I've personally known people that have been hospitalized because of they live in close proximity to the river. And at night, they've just not been able to breathe. And then I started to have shortness of breath, chest pains, dizziness. I actually thought I was having a heart attack. So I went to the hospital and they couldn't find anything wrong with my heart. But lo and behold, the symptoms that I was experiencing are, symptoms that can be displayed by somebody who's exposed to high levels of hydrogen sulfide. So it's been devastating, not just to Imperial Beach. This is primarily affecting the communities adjacent to the river, which are outside of the city of Imperial Beach boundary. They're within the city of San Diego, communities. And we just haven't had the support that we need from the county, which is the health authority, or from the state or the federal government.
And this is where you really start to hear frustration from the residents. Sometimes the cause of environmental problems can be hard to isolate. Solutions aren't always mutually agreed upon. But in this instance, we have a known problem. We have plenty of data and studies to confirm the existence of the problem, but there's a lack of support and action from the state and the federal government to help solve the problem.
And I just want to add this because I want to make a clear definition here that we're talking about the executive branch's inaction. The legislative branch has been very supportive. Our local congressional delegation, both at the federal and the state level, have advocated for solutions. The congressional delegation helped us secure $600 million that are going to not just rehabilitate, but expand the sewage treatment plant on our side. The state delegation called for a state of emergency unanimously. All 120 California legislators voted in support of the call for a state of emergency. So I just want to make that clarification. So Mexico, what Mexico is doing in 2022, they signed a memorandum of agreement with the U.S. and committed to funding $144 million of their own money to wastewater infrastructure. But in the meantime, there's this false belief that by these 2 sewage treatment plants being fixed, it's going to fix our issues. And it will not. It will help, but it will not eliminate the source of pollution to us, which is the river itself. The river continues to flow when it shouldn't be flowing. We haven't had rain. It's flowing at 40 to 80 million gallons of raw, untreated waste. Southern California river systems don't flow when it doesn't rain. So imagine it's just pure concentrated waste flowing at a daily basis and permeating our air, our soil, and obviously our coast all the way north of Imperial Beach now to Coronado. If this were happening in La Jolla, if it were happening in Carmel by the Sea or in Marin County, this would have been addressed a long time ago. South County, San Diego, is primarily a working class, minority, majority community, a border community. Now the interesting thing, it's not just affecting these residents and constituents, it's also affecting our national security because, as you may know, every single Navy SEAL in the nation that becomes a Navy SEAL trains here in Coronado, off the coast, in polluted water now. So they're being impacted. Border Patrol is breathing in these toxic fumes, which are hydrogen sulfide, that are 166 times above state standards. We have schools within half a mile of radius of the main source of pollution. It's extremely concerning because we have been hearing reports from pediatricians, from urgent care doctors, practitioners that their patients that they're seeing are coming in with elevated rates of asthma, allergies, migraines, and a slew of different illnesses.
Dr. Kimberly Dickson, South Bay Urgent Care owner and physician, and resident of Imperial Beach. So it was in August of 2023 where we started, our light bulb went on. And when I say our light bulb, I mean me and my husband. We were signing charts for the day, and we were noticing that there were a lot of patients that we were seeing with diarrhea. We would normally see just a handful of patients with diarrhea, but we were seeing double, triple, 500% more patients with diarrhea. And so we started thinking, what is the correlation with this? It was raining. It was Tropical Storm Hillary. But ultimately, there was a large transboundary flow, a lot of sewage coming across the river. And so we started looking back at our electronic health record, and we noticed every time there's a large transboundary flow of sewage, we see more patients with GI illness, vomiting, diarrhea. And so kind of our light bulb went on, we put 2 and 2 together. A lot of sewage coming down the river, a lot of people getting sick. But what was interesting about this is because it was Tropical Storm Hillary, there weren't people in the ocean swimming. So how were they getting sick? And that's when we took our information, we took it to the health department, we went public with it. We said, we're raising the red flag, something's going on, people are getting sick. We need somebody to come and look further into this.
Did somebody come?
Initially, the health department looked at it. There was some hesitation. They said they couldn't find a correlation. There was a little bit of a battle, for lack of better words. But once we were persistent, now we have the attention of the health department, the CDC. People are looking. The CDC knows there's a problem. People are getting sick. The health department now knows there's a problem. People are getting sick.
And do we know why? How are they getting sick?
And that's a great question. I really think there are multiple ways they are getting sick. I think there's aerosol. This is anecdotally my thought.
Sure.
There's aerosolization from the ocean for the people who live here. There's people getting sick because of the river and the hydrogen sulfide. There's people getting sick because they're driving through the sewage contaminated roads down off of Hollister. There's multiple ways they're getting sick, which is exactly why it was so hard to find a correlation. That's what made it difficult for the health department initially, because it wasn't as though there was one restaurant serving a food that was making people sick. It's in our community. It's everywhere.
Is diarrhea the only symptom?
No, I mean, we're seeing patients with diarrhea, vomiting, GI illness, skin and soft tissue infections. We will see Border Patrol agents who maybe had to go into the Tijuana River. They'll come in and they'll have infection on their, it's called cellulitis, infection of the skin, related to going in the Tijuana River with the contamination. We're seeing it in our Navy SEALs, and especially in our Navy SEAL families. That's what's interesting. So the Navy SEALs, I mean, they're tough guys, right? They tough it out. They get diarrhea. They may not seek care, but they take the E. coli, the norovirus, whatever it is, home, and their families are getting sick. So then we'll see the children of the Navy SEALs with recurrent vomiting and diarrhea related to the sewage, even though they're not in the sewage. It's a contamination. We're also seeing asthma type symptoms and headaches. The hydrogen sulfide levels are so high. The patients are coming in and they're being diagnosed with migraines, chronic headaches. And they tell me, well, when I leave IB and I go and stay at a family member's house, somewhere else, I don't have any symptoms. And it's the hydrogen sulfide that's causing those symptoms. Asthma, lots and lots of asthma. Hydrogen sulfide triggers it, and they'll need increased breathing treatments, increased amount of albuterol. It's unfortunate. You can't really escape it. Our community that lives down here by the river, we're not necessarily an affluent community. So these are patients who don't have the luxury to leave. And so these kiddos are going to school every day smelling the hydrogen sulfide. Then they go home and smell it. And the air pollution control district says, stay inside. Well, we don't want our kiddos to stay inside. We want them out playing outside, running around. But if they do that, they're more exposed to hydrogen sulfide. And then they start wheezing and they can't escape it.
And this leads us to the Surfrider Foundation's own Sarah Davidson, who manages the Clean Border Water Now program. I wanted to speak to her just to get some clarity on potential ways that we can actually solve this problem.
Well, we would need hundreds of millions of dollars to build the existing infrastructure plan that spans the border. It's a suite of infrastructure projects on both sides of the border that together are expected to reduce year-round transboundary flows by about 75%, and beach closures in San Diego County by about 95% in the summer months. It's called the Comprehensive Infrastructure Solution. It's been sort of designed and vetted by the Environmental Protection Agency. It's gone through a public comment process. Many of the aspects of it are ready to be built, provided that there's funding in place to do so. But there is a gap in the funding to do that. Two major projects that are the core projects of this plan are a treatment plant in the US and a treatment plant in Mexico. And last year, both treatment plants broke ground. So that's really exciting and important progress. We expect the treatment plant in Mexico to be completed sometime in May. And the treatment plant in the US, the International Wastewater Treatment Plant in San Isidro, a neighborhood of San Diego, has a design build contract that has been started, which means that they're designing at the same time that they're building it to save time, but it's still slated to take between 5 and 7 years.
Wow.
Plus or minus 18 months. And we feel that that is totally unacceptable. It's already taken at least 5 years to get to this point. So now we're talking 10 years or more to just, fix and expand an existing treatment plant that's vital to protecting people's health. So we really are advocating for a shortened timeline, more funding, more resources there. Unfortunately, it looks like the budget for the International Boundary and Water Commission, which is the agency responsible for making this happen, their construction budget is likely to get slashed by Congress. And it's pretty disappointing because we've worked really hard to try to improve their construction budget to address these issues. Another project that's worth noting is called the River Diversion Project. It's pretty critical to addressing one of the biggest concerns to public health right now, which is air quality. And the reason for that is because the International Wastewater Treatment Plant in South San Diego County treats sewage coming from Mexico in trucks and through pipes, but it does not treat water coming through the main river channel. And right now, the biggest source of pollution that is aerosolizing and becoming a source of air pollution is in the main river channel. So none of that is being treated. And in order to treat it, we need to create new infrastructure to treat it and release it. And until that happens, this really critical issue that's probably the biggest source of concern right now for public health in general will continue to get worse because the water pollution is getting worse.
Yeah.
It's highly complicated by the jigsaw puzzle of jurisdictions.
Gotcha.
Highly complicated by the international nature of this and the US not having any jurisdiction over a sovereign nation where the majority of the source of the problem exists. And it's highly complicated by the fact that just the amount of money needed to address this changes regularly. Like, it's really hard when people ask me, how much is it going to cost to fix this problem? Well, every time I hear from the agencies responsible, that number is higher. And that's because of inflation. It's because the problem's getting worse. The solutions have to get bigger. They have to keep up with the worsening issues and the new information we get about where the biggest parts of the problem are. And a great example of that is the River Diversion Project. This is a project that's considered a supplemental project in the comprehensive infrastructure solution. It was not considered one of the core projects. So it has not been funded. It has not been vetted through a NEPA process or a public comment process. It has not been designed. There's currently a feasibility study underway just to determine different options and their feasibility. And had we had the information we now have several years ago when the comprehensive infrastructure solution was designed, I'm certain it would have been part of the core projects and we would have already gone through all this procedure. But because we didn't have that data, it's when people give an estimate of cost, it's not even included in there.
It feels pessimistic. Do you feel optimistic that you'll be able to witness the solution in your lifetime?
I feel optimistic that more and more people are getting involved. More and more people are raising their voice. More and more leaders are listening and becoming champions for solutions. And there's more and more collaborative efforts happening across sectors, across communities, across the border. And I think that's exactly the direction we need to be moving in order to make change. So that really gives me hope on a daily basis to continue to do this work, to continue to live in this place, and to continue to fight for solutions alongside partners and community members who are most impacted. And, public health should not be a partisan issue, just like water quality shouldn't be. So hopefully, once there's enough information about the public health impacts and it's really recognized as one of the, if not the worst public health crisis in the United States right now, we can get some of the prioritization we need.
And that's why the need for the state of emergency, because as you know, environmental regulations and processes can take a long time.
Right.
And at this point, we can't afford the luxury of going through those normal processes. We need to waive everything so that we can divert the river for treatment. And there is the ability to do that if there's enough political will.
I'm not counting it in years. I'm counting it in not even in days. I'm counting it in patients getting sick. So every day we prolong this, it's just more patients getting sick. I don't think it's acceptable to prolong it any further. We know people are getting sick. And last time we were we went to Washington, D.C. I've gone with the mayor a couple of times to try to advocate for the health of our community. Last time we were there, they had said, well, the plan is this many days. And I said, that's not acceptable. Every single day, more people are getting sick. When you tell me 18 months, I'm thinking, 400, 500, 600 people. I'm counting it in people, not days.
The transboundary, Tijuana River's pollution emptying into the Pacific Ocean is not just an Imperial Beach problem. The pollution is aerosolizing, and universities are publishing papers to show that the contamination is a persistent public health threat with major economic, legal, social, and health implications to increasingly more of San Diego County. As it is neglected, the problem grows, containment becomes more difficult, and the solutions become increasingly expensive and complex.
Surfrider has been an incredible partner, thought partner, advocacy partner, education partner. I've had the honor of being accompanied by a Surfrider representative to the White House last December in our last-ditch effort to get the Biden administration to declare a state of emergency. Sadly, that didn't occur, but they were able to deliver over 1,000 petitions of Surfrider supporters. And that is so incredibly uplifting because it's sometimes, it does feel like you're screaming to the four winds and nobody's listening, right? But I have to continue to do that because that's my responsibility as the mayor of Imperial Beach, and even advocating for communities that are not my own. But having Surfrider's partnership in that journey has been incredibly uplifting. Persistence is everything, and we've talked to our friends in Flint, Michigan that also felt the same way and finally are now resolving it, and they're cheering us on saying don't give up, because when it seems like the most hopeless is when you start to finally power through, and it does feel that way, and that's why it's so important to build these coalitions of different stakeholders like with Surfrider and other groups. Because it's tiring work, but it's necessary work, because if not us, who? And if not now, when?
Lend your voice and show your support for the Surfrider Foundation at surfrider.org. My name is David Scales for the Surfrider podcast, and I am reminding you that the ocean needs more friends. So show your support and become a member at surfrider.org. Thanks for listening.